Go ahead. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Azure Flash News. As usual, I am Rick Weinberg, your friendly neighborhood CSA, and joining me today is...
Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Lunzer. I'm an Azure TSP and a counterpart to Rick and Mark. Mark is up in the air right now, so he couldn't make it.
He's in the clouds.
He's in the clouds. He's moved to Azure.
That's right.
That's it.
What is that? What are they? He's achieved complete enlightenment, and he has turned into pure energy. It wouldn't surprise me if someday it happened to him. And the gentleman sitting next to me as well. I am usually humbled when I sit next to them and they espouse their wisdom on me because it's always a good time.
Oh, wow. I'm blushing.
So it is December 7th, and some good subject matter today to talk about. It's interesting because we're coming off of, even though this is Azure Flash News, we're coming off some announcements that AWS has been talking about. And,
yes, reInvent.
I'll say this: a rising tide lifts all boats, right?
Mm-hmm.
And competition is great in a free market society. Well, we're not technically, but in our ecosystem, in our industry, competition is good because it motivates everybody to do better, to make more, to innovate, to disrupt, all that good stuff, right?
Yes.
And one of the cool things I saw this year was a focus on the enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a sneaking suspicion that we forced them to engage in that domain and to innovate or try to innovate in that domain because they see us as doing being successful there. So to me, that's a compliment.
Yeah, I think we're at a maturity stage where a lot of cloud providers are kind of playing games of leapfrog.
Yes.
And recognizing what other cloud providers are doing and doing things to catch up, or perhaps leading in other ways and forcing others to play catch up. And I think, reInvent had a lot of good announcements.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the more interesting ones was, a lot of kind of hybrid conversations that took place regarding, their ability to kind of fuse into enterprise architecture, which is something that we've been doing for a long time, and is really kind of a core focus.
We were doing it before it was cool.
We were doing it before it was cool. So I think to some extent, kind of acknowledgement of that being a strategy of our platform that, they're now following in, and we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, and also, it's also, I'm saying, welcome to the wonderful world of supporting on-premises deployments, AWS. Your life is about to change. It's about to get a lot stickier and a lot more complex, because it's one thing to support stuff in your own cloud, in your own data centers, in your own racks and VMs or machines. It's a whole nother thing to support on-premises deployments where you've got authentication challenges, you've got network challenges that you didn't anticipate, you've got proxies and firewalls, you've got all kinds of variants of what you don't have in your cloud. So welcome to the party.
Yeah, I think we've long recognized that, being the enterprise cloud, that enterprises have substantial investments in their data centers and their on-premise environments, and we, of course, need to support and be cohesive with that, so a very hybrid strategy. I think other cloud providers now that are obviously focusing their efforts further in the enterprise space certainly acknowledge that and are making their offerings.
Okay, let me ask you this.
Kind of to align with that customer ask.
Let me ask you this question.
Yes.
Is it data or data?
Is it tomato or tomato?
Oh, it's tomato.
It's tomato? Okay, shoot, I always say tomato.
Uh-huh. No, I'm always interested because
root, tomato, tomato,
well,
data,
if you're from the Midwest,
Azure.
Root.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so
enough of that.
I digress. We've got some good topics, some DR stuff with VMs across regions, which is exciting. If you're in addition to zone availability, or zone availability, availability zones. Some Gen 2 data lake storage preview capabilities, some new features, performance stuff, VNet service endpoints for SQL data warehousing, which is awesome, GA, VM in-place restores, which is neat. And last but certainly not least, bringing serverless to AKS by way of some technologies that we've created and contributed to the open source community. But the whole concept of a virtual node and doing all this stuff is really cool. So, having said that, let's begin. Disaster recovery of zone-pinned Azure virtual machines to another region. Okay, so availability zones basically are a concept where we spread your virtual machines, not just across a data center, but across multiple data centers within a region.
Right.
Right. And so from a DR perspective, availability zones doesn't give you disaster recovery. Arguably, I say availability zones gives you much higher availability than, say, availability sets across one data center, but it's still not a DR strategy. Well, what happens if an entire region, and you know, we always say, well, that'll never happen. Natural disasters, there's all kinds of things that could cause that. So you still, just by having availability zones does not get you out of the business of having a solid DR strategy, right?
That's right.
Absolutely. So with Azure Virtual Machines, you can build HA into it with availability zones, but with disaster recovery. So we're announcing support for DR for VMs that are deployed into availability zones by being able to essentially replicate and fail over zone pinned VMs into different regions.
Right. So I think for those of you that are listening and kind of consuming all of this, high availability is always a big topic.
Yep.
And you have to, you know, kind of identify from an application perspective what high availability standards is the business asking of you. So we've got multiple high availability options that you can consider, and maybe it's worth spending a minute on that and then pivoting into DR
absolutely.
and kind of putting a bow on this. So
great point.
You know, we basically started with availability sets. Okay, so those are different than availability zones. Availability sets are where you take an application tier, let's say a web tier, and you deploy that into an availability set. And what we do from a platform perspective are take those virtual machines and put them in different physical racks in a data center, so that you don't have a single rack failure that can bring down, like a top rack failure that can bring down your application. So they're basically spread across multiple racks in the data center. And by implementing that strategy, you get 99.95% high availability.
Which is pretty darn
that's
good.
pretty good. If the business is asking you for 99.95, then you know that's a strategy to honor that. Some applications don't operate in a multi-VM deployment.
Right.
In that case, you can actually, we're the first cloud provider to do this. So talking about kind of the competitive pressure and the competitive landscape and how this all kind of materializes. We have a single instance high SLA for a virtual machine. That's 3 nines of availability. So you can actually deploy a virtual machine, a standalone VM, using premium storage and get 3 nines of high availability. On the other side of availability sets are availability zones, which Rick already alluded to, where you can get 4 nines of availability.
Okay, and so for those of you keep tracking at home, that's 4 nines. Not,
4 nines.
Not 9995, 9999.
That's right.
Approaching the quasi-elusive unicorn 5 nines.
That's right.
Which is, you know, up until now has been really expensive, but we're darn close.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, you know, if you deploy 3 VMs into an availability set, they're across 3 racks. If you choose to deploy 3 VMs in an availability zone, they're across 3 different data centers that have separate network, separate power feeds, and are isolated so that if a single data center in a region fails and cooling fails, your application will continue to operate. And there's no financial cost for doing that. So it's really just a design decision that you have to make. And what the announcement is with site recovery is that availability zones certainly could be impacted by a large scale regional failure. And if the business is asking you for not only providing high availability, but also making sure that in the event of a disaster, our application continues to survive, that's where Azure Site Recovery, or ASR as a lot of people term it, come into play, where you can replicate those virtual machines from region A to region B. In the event that something happens in region A, you can fail over to region B and continue to offer application uptime. And the beauty of that is, in conjunction with that, is Azure Site Recovery allows you to test. So it's not just, hey, if this happens, this is what we do, and it's a finger-crossed moment. This is something where you can actually test and validate that it works, that your application functions prior to actually executing a failover. So it takes what's commonly a tabletop paper-driven exercise for DR. We know what we're going to do in the event that it happened. It's right here in this big stack of papers. We're not going to, you know, put together this big thump factor document to kind of have an artifact that demonstrates. You know, that's a term that used to be happening with consult. I used to be a consultant in a previous life, and people would say, "Well, what's the deliverable to the customer?" Well, I've got this. It's this really large document. It's got a lot of thump factor. There's this connotation that bigger is better.
I'm stealing that. I'm stealing that.
Well, anyways, site recovery allows you to. You can steal it all you want. And site recovery allows you to actually fail over and test that on a regular basis. So fantastic tooling, fantastic pairing with availability zones. So a great way to achieve not only high availability, but protection in the event of some volatility within a particular region.
Absolutely. So yet another reason why you want to adopt the cloud and not try to do this at home, right? On this show I've said it a gazillion times. Treat your resources like cattle, not like pets. Stop trying to roll your own. Don't roll your own security. Don't roll your own. I mean, these things have been developed by reams and reams and reams of engineers. It's just another example of where you get the benefit from economies of scale.
Yeah.
And from a software company we've got our battle scars, man. I mean, we've been at this for a long time and we haven't been perfect, but we've learned from those mistakes. It goes back to Satya's mantra: don't be a know-it-all, be a learn-it-all. And I think being a learn-it-all is reflecting on past experiences and past failures, right, as learning experiences, and how do you take that and move forward. So again, this is a great example of where you can take our technology, incorporate it into your infrastructure, your continuity plan, your business for little if nothing, and you look like a rock star to your business folks, right? Because you're not seeing necessarily the traditional on-premises data center outages that you're not seeing that anymore in Azure because you've got this availability and this recovery.
That's right. I mean, any technology initiative should start with the business problem that you're trying to solve and make sure that you've got kind of a full set of requirements, and then look at what options are available to you to solve for that and to meet those requirements. And a lot of organizations consider leveraging kind of cloud native means of doing that, taking advantage of the platform and delivering on kind of what the business needs are without doing a lot of growing your own and building kind of Snowflake-based deployments.
Absolutely. And not when you say Snowflake, you don't mean the Snowflake software product. You mean Snowflake as in
not the data or the data
exactly.
Solution from Snowflake.
Which is a great solution. We're saying, don't try and build this one off. Try and be unique. Need a crying room. We don't need that.
Site recovery actually allows you to fuse in some custom automation as a part of your recovery job, so you can actually have the best of both.
Arguably, we could do an entire show dedicated to ASR. There's so many cool things that you can do.
We really could.
I know.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
I'm not saying. I'm just saying. All right. So awesome stuff. Awesome sauce right there, right? No, there's some really cool stuff. So the next announcement, Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2, right? So for those of you that don't know, Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 is a new, well, as the name implies, second generation. But what they've done was they took Azure Data Lake Storage and they incorporated it into our storage namespace, right?
Yes.
So instead of being a one-off, where you had weird kind of regional deployment challenges and other issues that you had to deal with, we brought it into the storage space. And I don't just mean the namespace, but I mean the capabilities, the resiliency, the performance, the availability, all that stuff that you saw within Azure Blob Storage, table storage, queues, etc., is pulled into the Data Lake Storage as well. And the other nice thing about pulling it into storage is that it became broadly available.
Yes.
The nice thing is because it's part of that storage set of services, it is now available basically where storage is available. So everywhere.
That's right. Yeah. Typically, when we open a new region, and we've got 54 today and growing.
Yes,
talk about another area of leapfrog.
Yes.
Azure still maintains.
I was going to say, we have yet to be leapfrogged in our number of regions, that's for sure.
That's true. So I think we've got still continue to have more than AWS and Google combined, and we're opening up more regions seemingly by the month. And that's a differentiator for us, and I think that's compelled other cloud providers to also go to regions where we already have presence.
Absolutely.
But given the fact that when we open up a new region, there are what we call ring zero services, or services that have to exist in every region. Compute, storage, networking are typically kind of the three key pillars in addition to other services. Given the fact that now Azure Data Lake Gen 2 sits on top of Azure Storage, and it is what we call a ring zero service, meaning it's going to be available essentially in every region that we open. We know that now by proxy, putting this HDFS endpoint on Azure Storage is going to ultimately mean that Azure Data Lake Gen 2 is going to be available in every region that we have deployed today, and every region that will come online in the coming months and years.
And critically important to organizations that are dealing with data sovereignty, data fencing, geofencing of their data. By having this available, you don't have to worry about violating any geopolitical boundaries. By keeping your data in country, GDPR obviously comes to mind. But so that's the benefit of having Gen 2 as part of the storage ecosystem, but there's some announcements, some really cool announcements. So there's some things that'll be available shortly. So enterprise class security features are integrated into Azure Databricks and Azure HD Insight, which is exciting because security just becomes more and more important, obviously, as we go to the cloud. Azure Storage Explorer is going to be able to view and manage data,
yes.
Which is neat because sometimes it's a challenge, right, dealing with some of the things that are in that data lake.
Yeah, if you're comfortable with a tool like Windows Explorer, you use that to browse your local drive or network drives. Azure Storage Explorer is a free tool developed by Microsoft that you can download and install that allows you to peruse our storage solutions in Azure, and now that's working with Azure Data Lake. So a very like-for-like experience with Data Lake using Storage Explorer.
And like-for-like is great, right? To not have to go learn one off or pick another tool or do another foo, whatever it is always, always, always important. Support for connecting external tables in a SQL data warehouse is exciting because even including when storage firewalls are active in that account. So you can obviously secure your data, you can hide it from prying eyes, but at the same time, you can incorporate that into your Azure your data lake by giving you a richer set of data, by being able to query data through different structured, unstructured, semi-structured, etc. Right? So that's a nice tool. Power BI and SQL Data Warehouse are going to be supporting the common data model, the CDM, right, for entities in ADLS Gen 2. So it's going to make it easier to report on, to essentially associate it with other data through the data warehouse. And the common data model is nice because the word common being the key word, right? You have a single source of truth. You've got a common way of accessing things. You're not accessing data in this place this way, in this place this way, right? I mean, that's the whole thing about CDM, which is really, really nice, right? There's some other announcements. You can mount ADLS Gen 2 file system into the Databricks file system, the DBFS, which is exciting because Databricks is getting more and more traction. We're seeing a ton of activity in that space.
On the hype curve.
It really, really is. It really, really is. So there's some other really interesting POSIX compliant access control lists, RBAC, Azure Active Directory Connect. So definitely worth taking a look at if you're considering taking your data estate and looking at something like Azure Data Lake. We've got enterprise grade security, we've got common data modeling, we've got hooks into other technologies. So it's a really great place to consolidate your data and use, if you're doing Hadoop type workloads, really anything, right, across that entire data estate or even subsets of it.
Yeah, it's kind of a malleable service. I've seen it used where, we've got data teams that basically dump raw data into the data lake and then manipulate that data with some of the services that we just talked about, Databricks and other services. But they want to kind of keep that raw data stored separately so that they can go back to it in kind of an untouched state. Feels like data lakes kind of emerged as a good solution for doing something like that. And given the fact now that it's available everywhere, if you're someone who would be interested in a service like that or have been waiting for Azure Data Lake Gen 1 to become available in a region near you, now rest assured that Gen 2 is something that you can spin up to meet those needs. Worth mentioning, if we didn't already, is that it is in preview. So it's not something that we would consider suitable for production workloads. But at this point, it's something that is well worth spinning up and starting to execute pilots or proof of concepts with, just to kind of get your sea legs under that service and get more familiar with it. Just going to drop all these new kind of terms.
I know, right?
I
like this.
Trying to expand the vocabulary.
Right. I can use it. Trust me. I could use it. No, that's great. And that's great guidance too, right? When we talk about preview, that doesn't mean that it's busted and broken and beta and clunky. Sometimes we will introduce technologies in preview that literally we've been using internally for 5 years. It's just in preview because it's a new customer service. So, that's right. Definitely worth kicking the tires. A great opportunity to go, like I said, the data estate. And this is, when we talk about Azure Data Lake, I think one of the things that's really important to talk about too is the storage limitations, right? You're not necessarily limited by your traditional NAS, SAN, anything like that. You've got your storage account has 5 petabytes, but I believe Azure Data Lake Storage actually, I don't remember there being a cap on that.
I don't know that there is either.
So even at a minimum, even if there were a storage account is today capped at 5 petabytes.
Provision another one, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, really.
Exactly. And only pay for what you use.
That's right.
Yeah, so good stuff, really good stuff. So GA, VNet Service Endpoint, so kind of pivoting just a little bit here because Azure SQL Data Warehouse is similar but not the same. Obviously, it's more of a relational data warehouse type of structure, but what's cool about this is we are making the VNet Service Endpoints GA. So for those of you that don't know, service endpoints are really where we start to blur the line between IaaS and PaaS. You know, I've talked about that quite a bit on previous episodes. I am a firm believer that you should not have to pick PaaS or IaaS. You should be able to pick PaaS where it makes sense, IaaS where it makes sense, but still get the same comfort, same control, same security, warm fuzzies from a VNet, that kind of stuff. So we continue to innovate in that space, and today we are announcing the general availability of Azure SQL Data Warehouse, in addition to technologies that are already there like Cosmos DB, Azure SQL databases, storage accounts. We're doing private endpoints, private IP, backend IPs for PaaS services for web apps. Really important. And why is this important? It's important because you can now control, people get concerned when you deploy something into a multi-tenant environment like the cloud, and there's a publicly accessible endpoint, right? And I get it. I mean, I could tell you for hours and hours and hours how we secure it, but that doesn't matter if you're not comfortable with it. So what we've done is we've created these service endpoints that enable you, in effect, to shut off access from the public interwebs. Right.
This is really, I think, you know, Microsoft being the enterprise cloud, about us listening to our customers and making adjustments to our services in order to meet our customers' needs.
Absolutely.
So envision a scenario where you've got an application environment deployed into infrastructure as a service, and as a part of that, you want to leverage a Azure SQL Data Warehouse or Cosmos DB or Azure SQL DB, I mean, these PaaS services that Rick just alluded to. And you really want to make sure that there's no public accessibility to those PaaS services like Azure SQL Data Warehouse, but yet your application that's running in IaaS needs to be able to communicate with them securely. VNet Service Endpoints is a great way to do that.
Or you may want to connect to it via Power BI from on-premises.
True, right? Yes. So implement VNet Service Endpoints that injects the routes for that service directly into a virtual network, so your virtual machines know how to access it, and then you can shut off public access, tap into it for other services in kind of a similar fashion, and really have a secure deployment that security practitioners are going to appreciate and ultimately expect.
Oh, absolutely.
In order to be secure and compliant.
Absolutely. And not only, so I'll just call out Azure SQL Data Warehouse, not only is it secure and compliant, but it's faster, cheaper, and supports way more concurrent connections than our competitors' products like Redshift, for example.
Right.
But yeah, so the service endpoint's pretty cool. So basically you can allow access to a VNet only from a subnet. You can use on-premises NAT IP addresses. There's different things that you can do, but the whole point of this is blur the lines, right? It doesn't make sense to babysit VMs that host something like a data warehouse and have to worry about provisioning additional resources. Spend your time where you should be spending your time, maybe hardening your security story or working on optimization for workloads, or spend your time where it should be spent, adding value to the business, not babysitting servers. I mean, come on, that's an operating cost, right? And if we can reduce that, if we can get that out of the equation and get you to focus on, adding business value, that's where we all win. So another great opportunity to incorporate or infuse PaaS within the IaaS world and blur the lines between the technologies.
Better together. There's a nexus that exists.
Yes, absolutely. A nexus. Another one. A nexus. LexisNexis? Okay, so this one I know was a pain point, and this is probably something that's closer to your heart than mine, being more of in the app dev space. But I know historically, if you wanted to restore an Azure VM, you basically had to provision a new VM, correct?
Yeah.
So in-place restoration accomplishes something different.
Yeah, so look, the folks in the backup world probably don't have a lot of excitement in their lives, but this is something new that's been brought forward that I think a lot of people might have a lot of interest and excitement around. Look, there's a lot of great third-party solutions to back up and protect.
Oh, absolutely.
Virtual machines on premises and in cloud. The native way of achieving that in Azure would be Azure Backup. And because it's a fairly new service to the game, it's had some limitations that I think other tools have been able to meet.
More mature.
And this is a leapfrog thing, kind of back to where that was. But what this ultimately, and we'll drain this pretty quick because we've got another fun announcement coming up here, is that now you can ultimately restore a virtual machine in place without having to deploy something in parallel and moving disks or moving data back and forth, which really ultimately slows down your ability to recover and get
Absolutely.
something back into production. So a lot of organizations have recovery time and point objectives
RTO,
that
RTO,
yeah,
RPO,
that backup administrators have to really kind of account for in their solution set. And there were some constraints with Azure Backup that might have had some challenges with some really tight timelines. I think this will help meet that.
Absolutely. And so let me ask you this though too. I mean, if I'm provisioning a net new VM that to restore to me, that seems like there's a lot of orchestration stuff too, right? Because now I've got a different VM. I mean, it's not going to have the same IP address.
Different name, different IP address.
So if that's a database server, for example,
right.
I just kind of hosed any application that's trying to talk to that database. I mean, in theory, right?
Yep. So restore to a managed disk. You can restore it in place to an existing virtual machine. Ultimately, you can recover faster without having to go through a lot of manual work in order to get there. So it's basically all about speeding up the ability to recover.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Wow. So and how does that, so on premises, how would that, I mean, is that, do you do in place restoration on premises where you can roll back a machine, or would you have to do something
You
similar?
can, yeah. There are some solutions that take snapshots of virtual machines in a hypervisor landscape and can ultimately restore those virtual machines as is, and they have the
like
ability to deploy.
restore.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So there are some parallels that you might see in kind of a traditional data protection environment within a data center.
Okay.
But this really allows us to bring similar type capabilities to the cloud.
Very exciting.
To Azure.
That's awesome. Well, apparently that's not a real exciting group, but I'll take your word
I say
for
that
it.
in jest,
I know, of course,
but backup
of course.
is a big
Well,
deal. There might be nothing more important than
I was
data
going to say,
protection,
I mean,
right?
when you talk about the criticality of
Yeah.
business continuity,
Right.
if you're not backing your stuff up, you ain't in business once disaster strikes. I mean, it's that simple.
If it takes a while to recover infrastructure, that's one thing.
Right.
If you can't restore the data
Yeah,
that goes with that, then you're in a really dark place. So
Amen.
look at Azure Backup for protecting Azure virtual machines. It's a great turnkey solution, and there's lots of other third parties out there to consider as well. But a great native capability.
Great native capability. Yeah, absolutely. So last but definitely not least, bringing serverless to Azure Kubernetes Service. Okay. So we've talked about AKS, quite a few times on the show in the past, and I think I've mentioned on more than one occasion in talking with Brendan Burns,
Yes.
one of the co-inventors of Kubernetes, and even talking with Gabe Monroe, who is part of our Deus acquisition.
Yes.
I mean, rock stars in the containers in the Kubernetes space, right? When you ask them about the future of Kubernetes, when you ask them about the future of containers, they predict that within 5 years or so, everything should be serverless, right? We shouldn't have to worry about orchestration. We shouldn't have to worry about all these things. I just want to take some containers. I want to say upload or publish this image or deploy this image, and kind of be done, right? Well, in order to get there, there's lots of things that we have to do. So ultimately, there's Kubernetes right now has got probably more momentum than any other technology on Azure. It's a shiny new object, but it's also it solves a lot of problems, right? It solves the classic. Well, it worked on my development box. I don't know why it's not working in production. It definitely solves that problem. And with Windows containers and Linux containers, you now don't have to necessarily pick and choose certain technologies. So it really does open up a brave new world for how your resiliency and how you can deploy into clusters for availability and all kinds of other chocolatey goodness, right? So without a doubt, I think it's got some cool stuff. Well, we've introduced the technology called virtual nodes. Okay, so when we launched Azure Container Instances, which essentially is a PaaS version of containers, that gave you the ability to take a container, basically upload it into ACI, and now within seconds, you have access to that container.
That's right.
Right.
You can deploy it within seconds, and it bills by the second.
And it's that's another important part too.
Bursting scenarios.
Yes, and it's a top-level resource. So it's literally we treat it as a first-class citizen. It's a top-level resource. We were the first cloud to actually introduce that as a standalone or PaaS-based kind of service, right? But the problem is there wasn't necessarily, you have ACI, then you had AKS, or previously ACS, right?
Yes.
The challenge we have with AKS is basically scaling, right? And so with AKS virtual nodes, you can respond to a spike in demand so virtual nodes is the concept that we're talking about. And virtual nodes comes to us by way of, what was it, the
cubelet?
Thank you.
Cubelet?
Yeah, the virtual cubelet, at which we contributed back to the open source community, by the way.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
So what's cool is with this virtual kubelet, what you can do is you can create virtual nodes and you can respond to demands and scale within seconds, right?
Yeah. So what you're saying is a traditional container deployment deploys virtual machines that serve as nodes in your
Yep.
Kubernetes cluster.
Yep.
Kubernetes is busy orchestrating that, but if you have a lot of activity on your application and you need more compute capacity or additional nodes,
Yep.
spinning up those virtual machines takes time, right?
Yeah.
And that might be time you don't have.
Right.
Your application might suffer, your consumers, your customers might experience performance issues if you're not able to meet that demand in a dynamic way.
Right.
Azure Container Instances really is the answer for that, where you can spin up a container in a second.
Yep.
No underlying virtual machine that you have to spin up in
Nope.
order to support that container. And then the virtual kubelet that goes on that ACI instance talks back to your Kubernetes cluster and ultimately becomes a part of your Kubernetes cluster to host containers and run your application. So it's an amazing way to burst and to grow and to meet needs as needed.
Well, and not only that, but as you can see from over here, it's basically a toggle. Enable virtual nodes. Click, done. Okay, what's the next problem? No, you're right. It's a great way. And you know, again, I love the fact, so we donated, you know, we're donating the virtual kubelet project to the Cloud Native Compute Foundation.
Yeah.
We are big believers that, you know, again, we are an open source company. We believe that other people, not companies, not customers, not, you know, state actors, but people should benefit from this wisdom, this technology, but also help shape it, right? So we've donated the vKubelet or the virtual kubelet to the Cloud Native Compute Foundation, and I'm sure you're going to see other companies like AWS Fargate, well, technologies I should say, Alibaba, ECI, some of these other groups, Google obviously, are going to be contributing to this type of technology as well to enable kind of this really fast, elastic type of growth or demand response.
That's right. That's the spirit of open source, and we're certainly participating in that. And I guess the expectation would be we contribute that back to the community. Other cloud providers leverage that to help their customers, and then in addition to that, ideate around ways to improve and contribute back so that we all benefit.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, they kind of snuck a few things in here as well, like container instance GPU support enters public preview.
Wow.
So if you need GPU for some container workloads, if you're doing ML type of things, or if you're doing any kind of AI stuff, we see a lot of that being containerized with TensorFlow, you know, a lot of these different types of technologies. We are providing GPU support within container ACI. So you can literally bundle up your TensorFlow workflow or whatever it is, deploy it into ACI.
Cognitive services.
Yeah, cognitive services.
Or containerized,
yeah. Boom,
Azure
take this container, now you've got GPU support as well. So, you know, it just keeps getting better and better and better. And, you know, again, we see containers as being a here to stay kind of technology. There's definitely a future in it. And this just shows you that we're making these investments not only in making AKS better, but also making Kubernetes better for everybody.
That's right. And hopefully, I mean, these things are coming out daily now, updates to the platform. There's just this kind of unrelenting stream of updates and new announcements. So hopefully, you know, today kind of helped deal with some of the new announcements that we published over the past week. And I guess in that regard, you know, the Azure blog is a great way to keep up with what's new in Azure. So if you're not subscribed to that now,
Azure blog, Azure Learn.
Yep.
I highly recommend. Pick your path in Azure Learn, pick your discipline, pick your role or whatever, and then go on that guided discovery to the promised land. So, you know, as usual, thank you very much. We're at the top of the hour, and we greatly appreciate you tuning in either live or, of course, subscribing to the podcast. If you need to reach us, we are certainly available. Our Twitter handle is @AzureFlashNews. I can be reached directly at Rick, W-E-Y, at Microsoft.com. Matt, if anybody has any questions that they might want to bounce off you, how do they get a hold of you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn,
okay.
So feel free to connect with me there.
Awesome.
And also matt.lunzer at Microsoft.com is one way to reach me.
Okay, awesome. Well, as we say thank you to you, the audience, we of course say thank you to the MTC, who continues to make an investment in allowing us to host this show weekly. Thank you to Emily in the back, who always does a great job helping us orchestrate and provision and promote and does all the behind-the-scene logistics. In addition to Mr. Splinter, who, if it weren't for him, I don't know if we would have half the technologies that we have in this envisioning center to be able to do this for you. So look for us on iTunes, look for us on Stitcher, look for us on Google Play. Also look for some new swag coming up. We've got some stuff that's in the works. I actually have a design. I have ordered the first t-shirt just to make sure that the look is reasonable. And barring any problems, we will definitely have some new and improved swag, as well as we're potentially looking at integrating with YouTube and some other stuff as well.
Maybe we'll have to model it.
Oh yeah, not me though. I'm a model of what not to do.
Model of consistency.
That's right. So thank you, everybody. We look forward to speaking with you again, same time, same place next week. Until then, please keep your fingers on the keyboards, but keep your head in the clouds.
Take care, everyone.